Motion to open? Motion to open. If you like, I never do. Motion to open the meeting, second?
Second.
All in favor of opening the meeting?
Aye.
Anyone will vote no? So item 1 on the agenda, public participation. Again, as I always note, the viewing
Thank you.
audience is the point of the meeting where we invite people from the public to address the committee with questions or comments. Seeing no one here for that purpose, we'll move to item 2, but we'll always reserve that. So, item 2, school committee presentation update.
Really, it's just an update. We've put flyers out in town. We've done,
This is the school committee
No,
presentation.
this is school committee.
Oh, I'm sorry. School committee presentation occurred, I believe it was August 25th, where we presented the educational plan. At the time, it was looked at and reviewed by the committee itself, school committee, with Principal Miller and Dr. Rizzi present, and Carl and myself with TJ. We were surprised, I think, in general, that it was not that surprised, but it was. I think that's a terrible way of putting it. It was well accepted by everyone because of how thorough it was. There were some minor questions, but very much.
I'll switch if you want.
No, hand me that one. The battery's dead in it.
I have another.
That battery's dead in that one. Maybe why it's on,
Yeah. But the general feeling of the committee was very positive. Felt very strongly that the educators spoke through that education plan. It was did I use the right terminology? They could hear both Dr. Rizzi and Principal Miller in that education plan. Dr. Rizzi, you have comments on that from your point of view?
No.
Oh, okay. Principal Miller?
I hope our voice came through.
It-
Obviously, very gratified at the reception
And I think we all agree in this committee, it is a very thorough, is it about 50 pages total now? Education plan that we're going to be submitting as part of the PDP to the MSBA. Carl, do you have anything?
No, I think it's great that one, that it was timely that it was shared, and it's good that the school committee is on board and sort of moving forward with consensus.
That's all.
Well, community forum, either you, Carl, or Tim, and then we can just morph from that into the PDP program, PDP submission.
Yeah, I think 3 and 4 basically run right with each other. I'm just going to say quickly an introduction. The format will be on Saturday from 11 to 1. There'll be an introduction, a discussion about where we started and where we are right now. Carl has a presentation that will mimic somewhat, although there'll be some tweaks to the presentation to the community that he would like to share with us. But it basically talks about what we've been doing the last 4 to 5 months here as far as the space summary, the ed plan, the visioning sessions, the facilities assessment. So, want to start with Carl?
Yeah, as far as the community forum on Saturday goes, I'm sure, like most all information on this project, it's been well publicized. And
Can I stop you for 1 second?
Yes, you can.
My apologies, Carl. Katie Anokian, sworn into the committee? Well, welcome. Committee has a new member. I'd like to welcome Katie Anokian. You're the chairman of the school committee and now a member of the building committee. Welcome. And
There's room.
We've assigned you to 12 subcommittees, so.
and my apologies to Carl. I just didn't want to wait
Okay.
until. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's great that Katie's with us. So in the community forum, we just want to encourage people, if they are watching this, to feel free to participate. It's another workshop, so it's not all just sitting and listening. There is some sharing involved, we hope, getting feedback again of where we are in the process. So that's the idea of these kinds of sessions where we spend, roughly half of it in sharing the information to date, most of it or all of it that the building committee and or working group has seen. And it's a chance for the public then in the second half of the workshop to break up into smaller groups, usually focused on a specific topic, but it doesn't have to be, but where we'll have facilitators at each table and people can give us feedback on what issues are important to them, what concerns they have, or any other thoughts as we move forward in this process. And again, it's not the last time the public will have this opportunity. We'll have several more of these before we're finished here.
Carl, I noticed that one of the things on the agenda in the breakout sessions is something called evaluation criteria. Could you kind
Yes.
of give us an idea of what you're looking at for that?
Well, as we'll share tonight, there are still several options on the table here that we're considering collectively. And in order to move forward and pare down that list to one or two, to ultimately one, we want to establish the criteria that's important to Stoughton, not just to us as designers necessarily, or just to the administration, or just to even the building committee, but to the whole community. List what criteria will be used to evaluate those options. So that's one of the sessions will be for the public to give us input as to
Will
what's
you have
important to them.
some suggested criteria that
Sure.
we can talk about?
We've shared some of those in the past before, like cost, that
Oh, yeah,
people
that's gonna
understand
come up,
cost,
yeah.
but how about operating costs? How about traffic? How about educational program? How about opportunities? There are a long list that we can use to get discussion going, but we want, feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Is there an intention to give people an opportunity to comment on the options that they're going to see with the
It's
sticker
a little
amendment?
premature for that, Tim, but if they want to, we'll listen, but we're not actually at that stage. That'll happen a little later in the fall. But that's why the criteria are important to us, I
Right.
think, at this point in time. Okay.
What you're saying is, they can comment, but we won't listen.
Well, we're not going to focus a session on that. It's a little premature.
We always listen.
So,
We always listen.
It's fun.
and so I could roll right into the next item on the agenda there. The preliminary design program is what we've been headed to here for the previous couple months. And I'll share with you in the PowerPoint, but I also wanted to share with you in hard copy what it looks like. Here's an earlier one. Don't be scared. I put the pen in here because these are the real sections that are required. Most of it's double-sided. These are all the appendices, and it varies tremendously community to community as to what's in the appendix. But these are like previous studies, all the backup information, the nuts and bolts of the detailed building assessments done by our consultants, all 9 of them or whatever, however many we have. Things like that are back here, but this is the real meat of it up here, and this is where the educational program would be in these sections.
So that would be this big now with Stoughton.
Yes. And we give it to the MSBA in hard copy. We give it to them on a disc too, so they have it electronically. And it's put together, literally we're collecting those last couple of pieces of paper tonight and tomorrow. We pass it along to Compass. They review it for completeness. They put a cover letter on top of this and deliver it to MSBA. But I wanted to run through it with you tonight to show you in very concise fashion what's in here. These are the 4 main chapters in the book of information. So the first one, this is called the preliminary design program. So the educational program and the space summary that go with it are a big part of it. Analyzing the existing building. Site development requirements are those other kinds of programmatic requirements, not just educationally, but for the entire site. How many parking spaces should there be? How many fields, and so forth. And then preliminary alternatives. MSBA wants to know at this point in time, how many alternatives is the town considering? And they want to ensure that it's a broad range, that we haven't jumped the gun and have preconceptions. So the educational program is that 50-page document that is a narrative as to how Stoughton wants to teach and learn and in this high school, whatever form it should take. And part of that is this space summary form, I think I've shared with you before. It takes 3 pages of listing every space in the building. I've quickly just tried to extract some of the more significant bits of data out of there. There will be in the program 40 general classrooms, 10 science labs, an engineering and robotics lab, or each, 2 more. A host of special ed requirements, including full-size classrooms and smaller resource rooms. Those are all listed. 3 art rooms, 3 music rooms. We have a couple of large group spaces in the building, one which is more, you might say, part of the academic wing. One is more part of the arts wing, called a black box theater, which supports the stage and auditorium. A TV studio, an auditorium with 1,000 seats in it. The population of the school is 1,065. Learning Commons, which is a library, but it's sort of a 21st century version of a library, and then collaborative areas as well. So, and a host more. You can see it's 3 pages, so we list every office in the building, every classroom, and so forth. And the total square footage anticipated at this time, 224,287 square feet, and that includes the superintendent's offices. That's currently in the program. And that and maybe other items in this program are going to evolve as we move forward. This isn't the final. It goes in, it's actually labeled, preliminary design program. There'll be feedback from the MSBA, there'll be feedback from yourselves as we move forward, perhaps. And some of these things may change and evolve, including the superintendent's office or the number of classrooms or the size of some spaces. It's not final at this point in time. There's also a diagram, this kind of space age diagram of how the building is to be organized. The takeaway here, I think, for some of you, it's hard to read perhaps, but these are sort of clusters of classrooms. So it tells us as designers as we move forward, we don't simply want a double-loaded corridor with classrooms on both sides. And we want to mix in some teacher planning and support spaces with those classrooms. So it's not like the classrooms are one part of the building and the teacher spaces are at a separate part. It wants to be more integrated. That's kind of the meaning of that diagram. Also that the Learning Commons library / Learning Commons is more centrally located and accessible in the plan. And likewise that the cafeteria may also function as a kind of student commons and could be considered more in the heart of the building as opposed to simply at one end of the building. It may be a way it's organized. It is clear though that we want some division here between let's call it the academic part of the building and kind of the more public central core part of the building. The gym and auditorium in particular are spaces that could be used after hours. And so we want to have accessible entrance for those spaces without having to open up the whole school. We want the mechanical system to work such that just those spaces can be heated and cooled at the proper comfort levels when the rest may be on setback after hours and so forth for security purposes and otherwise. We want the administration area immediately adjacent to the main entrance. So there are a lot of little messages in here as we move forward, and this diagram too may evolve, but this is our starting point for organizing the building. And please don't read it as a floor plan. It obviously isn't. It's also 2-dimensional, and the building's going to be 3-dimensional. Most likely, it's going to have at least 2 stories in most parts, and probably 3 in a lot of. So a lot of these things are going to be stacked up, which now appear in this diagram just to be next to each other. And then the existing conditions. There's a whole host of sections in here, as I said, not just by us architecturally looking at the conditions of the building, but our mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, accessibility, hazardous materials, site, landscaping, all those sorts of things. There's a whole section in there about that. And also part of the existing conditions analysis has to do with not just the physical conditions of the spaces, but the educational analysis of the spaces. And one way we've done that in these diagrams, we have a floor plan here of the existing school. It's color-coded. You may not be able to read that, but it's like a traffic light. Green is good, red is stop, or red is deficient, and the yellow, we have a couple of yellow, are marginal spaces. And these are from a space point of view primarily, comparing them with space standards. So all of these classrooms here, science labs on this floor, are deficient in terms of space. They may also be deficient in terms of equipment or some other reasons, but primarily we're looking at space analysis in this diagram. And so as I flip through the floors, you can sort of see how many, even general classrooms are sort of marginal. And to us, marginal meant they were within 10% of the acceptable standard. If they were lower than that, we called them deficient. The gym is certainly deficient. The library media center is certainly deficient. And you can see, I think I can make the statement, we're counting up the things right now, a majority of spaces in the existing school are either marginal or deficient in here. So you can see all of these classrooms, for instance, very few green ones. So clearly any renovation option has to address that. We may be able to live with some marginal spaces without changing the walls. We'd still have to renovate the space and make sure it had proper heating and ventilating and lights and equipment. But we may be able to live with but in a floor like this one, we'd be tearing down all of these partitions and repartitioning that in order to get acceptable size spaces in there. Or alternatively, if it worked that way, we'd build all new science labs somewhere else and turn these into acceptable size general classrooms. That may be possible to save the construction of changing walls. But you can see sort of the extent of work that would be needed to bring these spaces up to be, even just from a space point of view, acceptable to general planning standards. So that's all part of the existing conditions. The site development requirements, roughly, as I say, address these items in the program. The educational program told us, I believe it was 315 parking spaces are needed. We clearly need a dedicated service, both a sort of loading area, service to the kitchen, trash going out of the building, dumpster area. Access and circulation. We want to make sure that the new plan, whatever it is, addresses safely all sorts of access. Pedestrians, bicycles, cars, buses, trucks, all need to be accommodated safely on the site. And more specifically, we know that every morning, every afternoon, there's a host of buses and a host of cars coming to drop off or pick up students. Those need to be safely segregated and a clear path for those students to get in and out of the building. Utilities, it's kind of obvious, but we need to mention it, and we need to investigate with the utility companies just to make sure that water, sewer, gas, electric can support the proposed facility, whatever it ends up being. Obviously, there's an existing school now, there are existing utilities, but in some cases, certain things do have to be upgraded. Sometimes the electric doesn't have, the right three-phase power available, or sometimes the gas line isn't large enough, so we go through the checklist sort of making sure all of those are sufficient. Athletic fields. Right now the premise on athletic field design is that whatever design for the building is chosen, we replicate at least the inventory of athletic facilities that exist now. So we obviously want a football field and bleachers. We want a track. We want this space of soccer field. We want at least, and this is 4.5 tennis courts. We'd like 5. That makes sense with varsity tennis matches. So from an athletic point of view, and there's some additional space where shot put, discus, some other field events happen. So those may not be in the same configuration in the future. They may not be made out of grass. They may be artificial turf. But regardless, in terms of accommodation, functionality, that's the goal with athletic facilities on the site at this point. And orientation and other site issues are mentioned as well here, just that if we have the ability and flexibility, we want to take advantage of sun angles and consideration of neighbors and abutters and things like that. Those are mentioned as site development requirements. Then we get into the options, the fourth part of this, the development of alternatives. And as you know, we've gone through this sort of decision tree. We've eliminated all of the possibilities off-site, so we're definitely on the Pearl Street High School site. We've got base repair. This full renovation option is really combined with base repair now, in the sense that it's kind of a baseline, but we know it doesn't satisfy the educational program. And we have to do some amount of addition to have a satisfactory. So the real feasible options are these four and these four. And we've labeled them B, 1, 2, 3, 4, C, 1, 2, 3, 4. So as we move forward, we're going to use that terminology. And some of them may drop away, so in the future we may just have, you know, C1 and 3, and people will wonder what happened to 2. But it's best that we keep the terminology, and MSBA recommends that too. So on the new construction side, remember these are the four options. They basically represent 4 different locations on the site. And they go back to the strategies somewhat early on. So the first new construction option said, let's do sort of a linear building closer to Adams Street, basically overlapping the track, kind of parallel to this property line at the south side of the school, and then demolish the existing school. I apologize, we sort of flipped north now. So the existing high school is here, Pearl Street is here. So here's that same option drawn. It's kind of, if you can see through there, you can see the fields below. Here's the track, here's the football field below, here's the parking lot, you know, currently now. It's obviously outside the footprint of the existing school, but it does overlap, and during the course of construction will obviously disrupt athletic fields. It'll disrupt parking here, and there'll have to be accommodations made for that. But this option proposes, you know, sort of a 2-wing school where one wing is a 3-story classroom wing. The other wing are those core facilities of gymnasium and auditorium, cafeteria and library commons are in the middle. The main entrance is in the middle, and with a car drop-off on one side, a bus drop-off on the other side, but students getting off there would all funnel in to the same main entrance, and administration would be located immediately adjacent to that. So that's one option there. And again, all these new construction options, the idea is that the building part of it would be built all at once while the existing school stays in operation with as little disruption as possible. As I mentioned, obviously fields and parking are somewhat disrupted. Service has to be considered in and out of the existing cafeteria, but for the most part the building continues as it is today during the construction period. And then obviously there's a flip over where and if we had the ideal timeline, you'd occupy the new school at the start of a school year, and the contractor would start demolishing the existing building, or at least abating and demolishing at the end of the previous school year, and you'd take advantage of that summer and then construct the new fields and parking. And the way the fields lay out in this one, here's a football field, here's a track, here's soccer field, here's some extra green space for those field events and so forth, and here's tennis courts. We only got 4 in because we were saving this nice tree that Julie likes to look out from her window there, but if we took that
You
tree
won't be
down,
able to see it from
we
the
could get 5. It is a nice beech tree right there, but anyways. And again, the layout of these fields, there is some flexibility, the type of material, and whether this becomes soccer and this football, we can still, you know, look at those options there. You can see that we don't touch anything beyond that in this option here. That basically you can almost draw a line where that driveway comes through the site now. Everything beyond that in this option, obviously the middle school and the fields there remain the same. The other thing to keep in mind in all these options is most of you probably realize there's a significant grade change from Pearl Street down to the basic elevation of the athletic fields. I think all of these proposals, I'll point out one difference, but all these proposals basically consider building at the elevation of the existing athletic fields. And the grade change is made up by, there's an embankment here. We would basically continue that embankment up to where the current parking lot is, and some kind of either sloped earth, or in some cases it might be retaining walls. So these parking lots are up high at the elevation of Pearl Street, but then there's a grass slope down, and this essentially is flat in here. But that embankment nicely forms a little bowl for the football field, so that these bleachers could be installed on the slope right there, which would be nice. And it sort of keeps it down from the street level too. So a second option is, we showed this early on too, a courtyard kind of configuration, still basically towards that corner of Adams Street and this parking lot here, and that property line, and what that looks like. And again, it's sort of flipped again. So here's Adams Street, here's that property line. So here's the courtyard building here. The different organization now is that the front door is still facing Pearl Street. So the front of the building, unlike that first one, the front door was facing Adams, which is a small residential street with small little houses here. This one faces Pearl Street, has a main entrance there. It proposes the academic portions of it be arranged in 3 stories, in clusters again, around a courtyard on the southern half of the building. The northern half of the building is the Common Core public facilities, auditorium, music, gymnasium over locker rooms and fitness and weight room. So in between is kind of a linear lobby. So it has a front door and a back door. Oops, we actually got this wrong. The main entrance is here.
That was going to be my question.
That's not correct.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Thanks. You picked that up too, teacher. This is the bus entrance after hours. This would be the main entrance because it faces Pearl Street, and this would be the administration. So again, immediately adjacent to the entrance. And this would be where the cafeteria student commons would be on the ground floor, and the library learning commons would be on the second floor. So again, it's like that diagram where those spaces are in the heart of the school, in the center of the school. Fortunately, they can get natural light from the courtyard, so they're not buried deep in the school without light. But they're sort of on this main street going through. And again, separating cars from buses. And the buses here, again, we've tried to respect in a couple of these, the notion that the buses serve both schools at the same time. And so they come through here and then can continue, whether they go back out to Cushing or just park here and load both schools at the same time as they do today. They could do that there. And we take, the required parking and kind of wrap the site and continue to use this parking lot off Cushing. And again, we've got football, track, and soccer, and in this case 6 tennis courts with a little bit of retaining wall there, because again, there's a slope here, and that slope continues through the site. We'd make it more gradual, because now you got this main driveway and it needs to come down at a gradual angle. We'd want that to be handicapped accessible, so this would be graded at 5%, which is a nice gentle slope coming around there. And so there might need to be a little bit of retaining wall here to hold that earth up, obviously to keep that flat, keep this flat. But by distributing the parking, you do get some parking, here, immediately adjacent to the football field, which is nice, or the tennis courts. And you can sort of distribute the parking around the building that way. So that's the second option. The third option is a similar courtyard building, but now closer to the middle school, moving it away to see, how that, and it mainly changes the disposition of the elements on the site. The building itself is fairly similar to the one I just showed you. Same, classroom clusters, auditorium and gymnasium, and one piece here with an after-hours entrance, the main entrance here with administration, the library and student commons would be in the center of the building. So the pieces are still somewhat in the same places there. Actually, we've got the student commons back here because we got service in the back now. So administration's on the first floor, library on the second floor here, service coming in here. We've got the same pieces for the building, but now you can see the site elements are arranged sort of much differently, in the sense that these fields are kind of now behind the high school. You got these two buildings very close to each other now, relatively, compared to what they are today. People will perceive it, I think, as being closer. It also puts the entrances kind of internal. It's almost as if this was a college campus, and this was a quadrangle. It's kind of that feeling. There is an upper parking lot, and in this case you come down the slope, and then a lower parking lot. So cars would come in this way and drop off and leave. Visitors would park here. The main entrance is right there. So that works fine. And then buses would come in this way and unload here, and again, those students would walk around. So the students, the pedestrians, are entering the building at the same point, but the cars and the buses are still safely segregated.
On this one, the primary entrance is still on Pearl Street, correct?
Yes.
No,
yes.
no.
That,
No, the
the
vehicle
visitor,
entrance,
the
I'm
visitor
sorry.
parking
Yeah.
would be here, so you would still direct people there, visitors. if
All right,
you-
so there'd be a
yeah.
big sign on Pearl Street saying, take
Yes.
a whatever
Again,
here,
we'd save
this
that
where it
nice
is.
tree and we'd put a nice sign
Enough
right
with the
there.
tree.
And that would become the plaza entrance.
Okay,
You own it now.
reasonable sign.
Pedestrians would come here as well,
Call it the Julie tree.
there. Again, we've got football, track, soccer, tennis courts here. So there's a lot of green space now in the corner, and the building is kind of pulled away from the neighbors, and more, as I say, of an internal campus. Then the fourth option moves the building even further in that direction now. And this is the one where the building really takes advantage of the grade change more than any other, because now the building is not sitting on the flat part of the site. The building is actually at the grade change. So there's still an entrance up here, no longer the main entrance, but there's an entrance and a drop-off here at the upper level, so basically at the Pearl Street level. Then there's another entrance here at the lower level, that off of Cushing or Adams, either way you can access it here. And administration would be down here, and visitors would be directed here. And now we bring the buses through again this way, and so the buses are picking up, dropping off at the main entrance, and the cars are picking up at sort of the secondary entrance. So for an event, here's the gym built into the hillside, the locker rooms in the lower level, and the auditorium now sort of follows the slope of the ground. So the stage is here, and the ground is sloped, and this flooring, the stepped seating in the auditorium sort of follows that slope. Obviously, all the green space is flat, so there is a green sort of hillside along there. You can see some steps coming down to this area here. So that's all at one level. Because this building is situated over the baseball field now, we have to recreate the baseball field as well as soccer, track, football. And the tennis courts end up back here, which isn't an ideal location. They're kind of landlocked back there, not very convenient for parking to get from here to there. But that's the way it laid out, because these three required sort of fields, so to speak, took up the better part of all that area. And again, the school is divided. Here's the academic wing, so to speak. Here's the common core elements. The library and student commons would be somewhere in the center again, probably on multiple levels. Service in here, bus loop here, and again, most of the parking is here now with one upper parking lot there. So that's the fourth option. So those are the four new options. We also have 4 addition renovation options, because again, we want to be comprehensive in looking at this. We don't want to leave any things out. And the easy way to think about these options is that from B1 to B4, they go from the option with the least amount of demolition to the option with the most amount of new construction and most amount of demolition. So in the first one, we'd just be demolishing the A building and a portion of the gym in this option. And the rest, those blue areas, get renovated. And so what we'd end up with, we take away this is Pearl Street again at the bottom of the slide. We take away the A building, we take away a portion of the gym, we convert the existing gym. This is the weight room and the old girls' gym that we take away. This is the existing gym that would remain, but be converted to a library. And to replace the A building would be a new administration, a new main entrance with some classrooms above. It would be a multi-story building, and it would still connect, because we, for circulation, we still want the flow through the school to be around that courtyard. But in order to meet the program, we need to build a new gym. And one place to do that is on the existing parking lot, kind of by the superintendent's entrance there now. We'd build a new connector on both sides so we could connect into the building at 2 places. It'd be a 2-story addition, locker rooms and weight room on the ground floor, gymnasium on the upper floor there. And there'd still be some room for parking remaining. But to do this, you notice that we're not building any new classrooms. This is a gym, this is a administration area. So in order to renovate these spaces, it can't all happen in the summers. We need to take kids out of here, teachers and students, and put them in modular classrooms for a period of time. And even, you know, that there is some area of green space in the front yard there. Even with all these modulars, that might barely be enough to do one wing at a time. So you take these teachers and put them in here and renovate that, and the kids flow around the school this way. Then conversely, you know, you take them out of this wing and put them in here, and when they move back into those. And we have thought about that. I don't know if you can read all this, but we've looked at the phasing to make sure, and we've met with the superintendent and the principal to talk about this. And it's not ideal, it's not perfect, but you know, it's possible and feasible. For instance, you know, the first phase is building a new gym. Well, the first thing is actually bringing in the modulars and some temporary parking, because you know, as soon as construction starts here, you lose some parking here, obviously, or probably all of it on the Adams Street side in order to construct that. But we'd build a new gym before we touch the existing gym, so the students are never without a gym. We'd renovate this library, but I'm not sure it's possible to do that while this still exists, but that would be the idea. In phase 2, we renovate the library. So again, before we tear down the existing library, a new one's built. So we've thought about those core functions. The cafeteria remains in operation always during the school year and gets renovated only during the summers. Probably it would take at least 2 summers. Sometimes we extend that, serve pizza and sandwiches, and try to go from May to, you know, the very first day of school or something in September to maximize it, because it is tricky to renovate a kitchen and cafeteria in just the few weeks of summer. But then each classroom wing gets renovated, you can see, in turn. One phase, so it ends up being at least 4 phases, a 5th phase to finish off the site work. Probably takes at least 40 months, 3 years, 3 school years there. So that's, you know, definitely something to be considered when we're evaluating these options.
Is the theory, Carl, on that option where the extensive renovation, that you'd take what is now an existing classroom wing and turn it into science before you took those offline?
One of the thoughts is to use the locker room area, because obviously if the gym moves over here, the locker rooms move with it. So now we've got the gym on the upper level that we convert to the library. Down below, I think we could create some new science labs. We've got that space, got the locker rooms, but at least get some full-size, proper science labs in there. We'd add some windows. One of the opportunities this does, by taking this away, we can get glass on this end of the building, get some light in there. So we can get some science labs in here, so that we probably still have to do some reconfiguration here to get those up to speed, but we could also convert some of those to classrooms. We haven't gotten down to that level of detail yet.
It's hard to do modular science labs.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's why we'd like to build some science labs as a way to compensate for, so that, again, the school isn't without science labs for a certain period of time. So that's
ask a
B1.
question?
Yes.
If you went with this option,
Yep.
why wouldn't you just, instead of putting the modules, why wouldn't you leave the existing gym, convert those into rooms?
Mike.
Oh, and, is it on?
Hey, Roberta.
Is it even on?
The green light on?
Thank you. Why
Yeah.
couldn't you just use the existing gym as float space for classrooms before you tore it down?
Mhm.
Because if the gym's in existence, I don't understand why you wouldn't just, why you need the expense for modulars that are gonna take up all that space when you have a building there. That
It's
could-
possible, Roberta. We could consider that. You can get a few in here. It's a little hard to get a lot of classrooms in there just because of the proportions of the space. You know, there's going to be a lot of windowless rooms in there, and ventilation is very hard to achieve.
But ultimately it becomes the library.
Right.
So
What she's saying, you know, you could renovate this first before you build the library. We have done that in a few places. It's not ideal, but that's an option, to look at how many modulars could we get in there, and how do we get ventilation in there and lighting, you know, to make them functional as classrooms. Acoustics is tough. You know, you end up building walls that don't go all the way to the deck. 'Cause, you know.
that would eliminate the modular trailers
That's my thought.
for
For-
that phase.
I don't
I don't think you can eliminate it.
I don't know that you'd get enough. I think you still need some. And so if you need some, you know, you got to build a connector. You got to, you know, while you're doing that.
Well, I guess I'm just looking at the size.
Sure, sure.
of, you know, the gym versus D building. You're only gonna do one level at a time. You're gonna do B, you know,
Yeah,
D1.
this is 6,000 square feet, that gym, which is kind of small, but that equals, when you put corridors in, that equals about 6 classrooms. So in each of these wings, you know, there's 6 classrooms right there, 6
Right.
more on the other side of the hall, 3 stories. That's, you know, there's like 30 classrooms in a wing here. So there's no way, and that's why we worry that we can even get 30 classrooms out front here.
Well, I guess I'm
But-
saying you're using just one of the gyms. You're not,
Oh, yes, you could keep these 2.
Right, keep
yes,
that there while
before you
you're-
demolish them, right?
I mean, I'm just looking size-wise. I'm
Yeah.
saying I'm looking proportionately.
Well, this
But
is
I'm
kind of
kind-
schematic too. I mean,
Yeah.
we haven't drawn this accurately as to how many modulars. We actually end up with some more modulars in the front as well. This is sort of just a schematic drawing right now. So, but a very similar B2 option is it almost could be called B1A because it's so close. The only thing it does, it tears down the gym in its entirety and builds a new library, as opposed to converting the gym to a library. So you can see that here. So instead of salvaging the gym part of this, we basically tear the entire gym down and build a whole new piece of construction here. Otherwise, it's virtually identical to option 1. So we're still using modulars, we're still tearing down the A building and, in this case, the entire gym, still renovating these. And we, again, building some new construction, we could build some new science labs in here and then perhaps convert those science labs into regular classrooms. We'd still end up with a somewhat new image to the school. You got a new piece of construction in front. Administration would be in that piece and so forth. But as I say, very similar to option 1. And we thought about the phasing here. It's similar. We did think about, in this one you can see a different option for drop-off. This goes back to that historical picture. If you remember the 1920s picture, I don't have it in the show right now, but of the high school, it had a little horseshoe-shaped driveway in front going. This is kind of just enlarging that idea and saying we could put a driveway there and get some parking here, and that becomes the main entrance there. That's a possibility. This is right where the grade changes now. So this is basically at the level of Pearl Street, then it drops down right as you come out this door. It goes, that sidewalk is more or less level, and then it drops down around the auditorium building. So, and the next option is now suggesting rather than add modulars, let's build new classrooms first. So in the same location as the gym on the parking lot side, construct a 2-story classroom wing that could tie into the building at 2 levels in 2 places. We could get classrooms now that are a little more responsive to the educational program. They're in clusters, and we can distribute some of the functions and support that wants to be in there. And again, we have to find a home for the gym because the existing gym is just woefully small and really can't be renovated. So the new gym would sit here. We'd tear down this classroom wing once we have these classrooms in place, and we could get a new gym here. And if we work the grades like I showed you with a parking area here, we could create a new entrance here that could be shared by the auditorium and the gym. It would connect into the existing lobby outside the superintendent's office, and we'd build new toilet rooms and support spaces there. And you could have a lobby that supports both, becomes the event entrance, as we say. But in this piece of construction would be the administration and the visitors entrance over here on that side, and as part of this would be a new library. There are a couple issues here in terms of phasing. Obviously, we could build new classrooms first. We'd have to think about parking. I think we could get this parking in first. So we'd build some new temporary parking to make up for what's lost over there somewhat, and perhaps even a drop-off area there. But the first piece of construction would be this, phase 1. Then phase 2 would be tearing down this classroom wing, because now we have a new inventory of classrooms, and build a new gym here. While that's under construction, remember the students are circulating around like to get to gym, going around this way, and this part's closed off, this part's closed off. We wouldn't tear down the gym yet because we haven't finished building this. So during phase 2, we've only torn down the A building up to there. Then during phase 3, after the gym comes online, we can tear down the gym, and the students circulate around this way now. and there's a barrier here and a barrier here. And it allows the, basically the final piece of new construction to be built. And then once that's done, at some point, the final classroom wing, which remains there, would get renovated. And again, the thought might be to build new science labs so that these can be reverted back to just be conventional classrooms there. So here there's, there is a separate drop-off here and here. There's, service becomes a little bit challenging to get into the cafeteria kitchen underneath here. We'd still maintain some parking along Adams Street there, and the classrooms are all, kind of broken up now. There's some here and some, here as well, with the gym and administration and library at this end of the building. So it has some advantages in layout, some disadvantages in terms of adjacencies too. And again, all of these, in our opinion, take about 3 years plus, 3 school years plus summers at either end, at least, plus the time after that to finish site work, parking, that sort of thing. And then the fourth option of addition renovation is when we tear down most of the existing building, save only the auditorium cafeteria, and build a new school, again, towards Adams Street. So it becomes very similar in essence to one of the new options, except that the cafeteria auditorium is here and the rest of the building program is on this side now, but it is still kind of a courtyard circulation pattern. There is a corridor here now. Those are those rooms behind the stage. The music rooms are in there. So we can connect that corridor through and have classroom clusters, new entrance off of Adams Street with administration located there. And then the gym is kind of centrally located in here. The circulation kind of goes around the gym. The gym is located in there. So, and then there's a little trickiness making this last connection. We can't quite build all of this while the existing school stays untouched because you have to wait till this part is demolished to make that final connection. So there's the first school year, probably this connection is under construction there while the existing building is demolished and that's built. So, but it is an option that because of the amount of construction, this is turned again from what you saw, but there's the existing cafeteria, auditorium building. Here's the new gym. Here's the administration, the main entrance, the classroom clusters here. And again, the circulation kind of goes around this courtyard here. And in all those previous ones, the fields were somewhat untouched. The parking area and the tennis courts got disturbed somewhat. In this one, we're obviously building a little bit more now onto the track. And so we show a new alignment for the track and a new alignment for the football field in order to accommodate this. So this option has a bit more site work involved to those fields than the other ones do. And you can see the progression then from, trying to do as little demolition as possible to doing, a much larger piece of new construction in option 4. So those are the 8 options. 4 new, totally new, 4 variations of addition and renovation. That will be in the preliminary design program. I think
Carl?
that's what we have. Yeah,
Right.
well, there's the plan of it. Yes, TJ.
Can I ask you a general question
Sure.
on all options?
Mhm.
So by my eye, the ad reno, it looks like B3 and B4 are closest to the closest to encompassing the education program.
Mhm.
And of the new options, there was one that may not incorporate, if I remember right.
Well, in varying degrees.
And actually, I guess what I'm asking is, can you discuss how,
Sure.
each of these options may or may not meet our
that's-
educational plan?
That's certainly one of our criteria moving forward is going to be how well do they meet the education plan. I think it's probably safe to say that a more compact building that still arranges the classrooms in clusters, gets those student commons and library more in the heart of the building, and still maintains that segregation of the public spaces from the academic spaces, probably best addresses the educational program. So from that point of view, the ones that are somewhat linear, like this one,
C1, right.
are not quite as desirable, but they still have certain, the classrooms are still organized in clusters, still have teacher support spaces and collaborative spaces in there. The library is kind of now, one end of this, not in the center of the academic, so that's a little bit different there. There's still good separation, obviously, between those functions. So there's some differences, in some cases subtle, in some cases a little bit more pronounced, but in our submission going in, at this point in time, we give just a very preliminary evaluation, more or less what I've said tonight in terms of evaluating these. But what we'll do in the next phase is develop that matrix that's more detailed and with more input from other people too, as to what's positive about this one or negative, or what opportunities are presented here that aren't in one of the others, that kind of thing. So and how it fits the educational program is a major one, of major importance, obviously.
Can I just ask one more question?
Yes, Roberta.
I guess when I thought of a renovation, I just think of demolishing, if you ever said, what would you do? Demolish a building. Just that whole area is nice and flat. And you look proportion-wise, the gym I understand the gym is no good. I was surprised that you never had a plan that basically knocked down a building and took what I'd say a new A building and stretched it all the way to Pearl Street and made it wider. Is there any reason why that wasn't one of the options?
Well, it has somewhat to do with sequencing of trying to, if we look at where a building is.
Right.
And what's in there, administration and some classrooms.
English,
So
yeah.
before we tear it down, we'd like to have new administration and new classrooms. So yeah, I guess if we considered modulars and moved a building into modulars and took this out, we could get a wing here.
Yeah, it would
but
be a good
see what
size.
it does. I mean, there are a lot of negatives about the existing school. One of the positives you might say is that at least there's some kind of circulation path. But if we had one long wing here, it kind of is hurting that.
I guess
by
I
having
was
it dead
thinking that
end.
would be where the gym would be. I guess that's my
Oh.
thought, it would be where the gym would be,
Yeah.
right there.
But don't you have an option with the gym in
Right.
front?
We put the gym right here.
No, I was thinking
Because
where
we're
A
trying
building
to
was.
get them to be segregated from the academic and share, if we can, a lobby and support facilities. A gym could fit here, yeah, if you took that. Right. You got
You want a separate area?
functions
Right.
at each end there.
Okay, no, I was curious. I just thought it was a nice level spot.
It is.
And that
it is,
building
yeah.
we know is no good.
But level is also good for parking too.
Right.
So and buildings actually, so we can get a nice parking area and drop-off area and kind of a front yard to a new piece of
Okay,
construction
I just was
there.
curious.
Yeah.
Other questions?
No, I was just going to ask if, it just struck me, did anybody talk to the historical people about the A building and whether or not it's of any historical value?
We've looked at the records. We're going to talk to them in person too, Joel. But on the records, it's not on the local historic commission's records, and it's not on the state's
Oh, good.
either.
Okay.
Not the original high
So,
school.
no, I think
It's not.
Jones
I have a
School
map.
was, right?
Yeah, down by there, I have a
Yeah.
map from 18
Yeah.
something, so, yeah.
All right.
So, but that's a required piece of investigation we have to do.
MSBA is going to be looking for it.
Yes, yeah. And we'll get a affirmative statement from the Mass Historic Commission that it's okay to tear it down if that's the way we go.
We're going to have to file a PNF anyways.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, jeez, don't even bring that up.
No more questions? Excuse me.
Okay.
Figures. Next is kind of a schedule update. Excuse me. Obviously, we've had one milestone here where next week we'll be submitting to the MSBA the preliminary design. There'll be a time period for them to review, and there'll be a time period for us for a district response. Going from that point on, we'll be in the preferred schematic part of the process, where we'll further define and analyze the short list. We'll start looking at operational and capital budgets. We'll start to look at and fine-tune estimates of the preferred designs. There'll be obviously considerable, discussions amongst ourselves with the working group. I know Tim has gone through a lot of these. Tim, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about the second part of this feasibility study.
I think the important thing that we're going to want to focus on, will start on Saturday, is the evaluation criteria from now these family of options, because we did it already on the site selection issue. So it would be good for this group to think about that. The next meeting, I think that'll become a major part of what we want to vote on, the evaluation criteria. I think the other thing that it would be good for people to get these schematics, this presentation, and make sure they understand it so they're comfortable, and ask any questions related to it, like the ones Roberta just asked, so that people feel, that they can speak intelligently about the analysis of it. But I think probably the next meeting, we're going to want to drill down further on those issues.
Oh, we will, yeah.
Criteria and the specific options. And we'll also have feedback from the, from the community forum too.
How, Carl, are going to have access to the documents? Do you have an FTP site or?
Well, typically we've turned the PowerPoint into a PDF that we can give to Jean.
No, I'm talking about the actual.
Oh, the PD.
Yeah.
This submission. It is. We'll have it on electronic version too. We generally don't put it on our FTP site as a web on our site, but the school could host it
We have
electronically as a PDF document.
Selectmen has a Dropbox too. Jamie can put it in our Dropbox that we can all access to. I'm sure the schools does as well.
Yeah.
I don't know that Ryan has an actual Dropbox, but, and it's very large, but.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be huge.
We do things like the master plan and larger docs. Jamie puts those on our.
Yeah, we can shrink the
Made
photos
accessible.
and things.
Yeah.
The resolution.
Yeah, a couple of projects I've worked on, they have an FTP site usually from the architect, and you can access that site and download documents to look at. But
If they can get Jamie the disk, she can put it on our Google Drive, and it's accessible to everyone through the town's email system.
I think that's, what do you mean by through the town's emails?
Well, you log into, if you have a Stoughton
Yes, I
Stoughton
do.
MA dot, you log into Gmail with that and with the password on your account, and you have access to the Google Drive.
Okay.
If you're invited, and you'll of course be invited.
Is it downloadable or?
Yeah.
All right, so that type of thing. So when you do that, the only thing I ask is that you separate
The appendix from the.
Thank you.
body
Yes.
of it.
Yeah.
Yes, I appreciate that.
There's some way we can quantify the renovation, add options. In other words, we start with B1. It's the 20%.
It's not unusual.
I'm surprised he listens to the
trying to
entire
fly
meeting
under
too, because
Is there some way to quantify how much of the existing building is going to be left versus?
We have quantified that.
You
I
know?
didn't put it in the slide, but it goes from, if I recall those numbers, Joel, it goes from about, I think the minimum is like 30,000 square feet of demolition. The most minimum is
That's the minimum,
30,000.
right,
With
to the maximum
the
of.
maximum is like 160,000 feet of demolition or something. But we have that quantified. How
Okay.
much new construction,
Just
how much
looking at it
demolition.
from Saturday's point of view, from people coming in, at some point, people would like to know, well,
Yeah.
how much are we talking about?
Yeah.
How much are we?
In almost all cases, the final product of the addition renovation ends up being close to the same square footage. That's kind of theoretically, we end up, more or less the same total square footage.
Right.
The distribution, though, between how much is renovation and how much is new construction is on that sliding scale. TJ, one other thing I wanted to mention about the process, too, just because we like to do this with all clients. When we submit these things to the MSBA, they spend, as Dom says, I think it's 3 weeks. I think they have up to 3 weeks to review it and distribute comments. There are always comments. Some people get nervous teachers particularly, like, why didn't I get 100%? What do you mean I'm getting comments? Did I do something wrong? And I say it particularly because they copy the superintendent, the town manager, the state representatives, state senators.
Yeah.
They make it a policy, and everyone looks at it. What? And you'll probably get calls as building committee members saying, "What's wrong? Why does MSBA have all these comments on your submittal? Is something wrong? Are we not going to get reimbursed? Is our project in jeopardy?" So we just want to warn you that it's standard. They will have comments. Sometimes the comment is literally like they have a template that they follow. It's a checklist. They love checklists. And they restate the whole thing, and then they say, "We find no problem." But
Right.
it takes a page to say that.
That's what I've seen. I've seen the same thing.
We take no issue.
Okay.
But sometimes there's clarifications, or there's a missing piece of paper, or things like that. And we have 2 weeks collectively to respond.
It's going to be extremely unlikely, based on what you've done to date, Carl, that they're going to throw the whole thing out and
No,
say this isn't going
it's
to
not
work.
that
They're
kind of
basically,
thing. Right.
they're going to pick at little things here and there so they totally understand it.
Yeah,
And yes, it
you know,
does
a
go
lot
to
of-
the
a
state
lot of
rep
this-
and the state senator, and these guys
A
go.
lot of this is documentation. So if they feel like they're missing some little legal piece of paper, you know, they'll ask for that, or and so forth. So,
So,
3 times, right.
yeah.
if nobody else had any questions, I just wanted to summarize where we go from here. So the end result of a PDP submission is approval, or is it just,
Just comments.
so it's not like, it's not an up or down, it's
I guess in a worst case,
Yeah.
they would say, "We don't want you to proceed to the next
Okay.
phase till you respond to these
Right.
comments."
And then
That,
when they
I guess,
do
in
say-
extreme case. Generally,
Right.
they just say, "You need to respond to these comments, then you can move on to
This
the next
doesn't even
phase."
go to the facility assessment committee. This
Okay.
stays within the staff.
This is just a kind of steering, all they're trying to do.
Yes, they want to make sure.
They're going in and
Yeah.
issues.
So we can continue our work
right.
Oh,
while
yes.
it's being reviewed.
We don't stop.
And the step beyond that is preferred schematic, which
Right.
would be in like December
Yes.
we're talking
Think
about.
on the
Oh, I'm sorry,
schedule.
you were going there anyway, Donnie, sorry.
Yeah.
No, that's true.
December
But-
6th or something?
And that's when we take the Bs and the Cs, renos and new buildings, and we hone it down to
One.
one, right?
that
I'm speaking for the audience.
And that one
more
has to
than-
be developed, so we
Yeah.
would probably, you know, I gotta look at the schedule, but we'll talk more about this, but we probably want that resolved by, you know, the end of
October, right?
October,
I was gonna
so
say,
that we can take November and develop it, and you can see it.
That's like a meeting away.
Huh?
That's like a meeting away.
Well,
Yeah,
if we
or two
need,
meetings. I mean, if we need more
Yeah,
meetings,
if
we'll
we
need
need
more
more-
meetings, yeah.
Yeah, we might.
we're on an aggressive schedule, so if we need to meet again,
Well, let me ask the question, is there going to be a breakdown on approximate budget?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's one of the first
That's the
things we
next
do.
thing.
Okay, so add renos is still get an extra 5 points, 5 percentage points more?
Well, I know
Why
what you're
not?
saying.
Not in reimbursement?
Right, that's the
There-
question I'm asking.
There's some incentive points for, it's not 5, I think it's up to 3.
3 is the last
I think
time.
and it's
I
predicated
thought it
on
was 5.
But-
how much of the
it'll
existing
be
building you're
proportional.
reusing.
Not to get too technical.
Well, I mean, a couple $1 million here and there
It could be, right.
is
1,
a
2, or
big
3
difference when
points.
you're a
Yeah.
taxpayer.
Well, something everybody in this committee is going to hear after a while is something that the MSBA calls a 3011 form. And the 3011 form basically lays out everything, and it calculates based on that, what that layout is. It's a big Excel spreadsheet that the MSBA requires you to do, what the dollar cost of the project is, how much of it won't be reimbursable, and what points extra you get for a variety of things. And that tells you what it is. So you might have 2 programs that are $1 million, like a new building and a renovation. They're both the same, but you might get a better return on the renovation than you do on the new building in terms of what they'll reimburse you for. But these, I don't know if you're going to do a 3011 for each one of these.
No, not at this stage, but
Not
we
at this
do we do a rough approximation.
A rough approximation, but the answer to your question, at least the ones I've seen, I expect to see what the value of the reimbursable grant is going to be for each one of these, at least in a rough point of view too. And that'll tell us what it's going to cost us in terms of taxes,
Mhm.
okay?
And you'll also do that on the athletic fields if they have to be dispersed somewhere else? because that reimbursement is.
Yeah, I mean, right now, we're trying to keep everything on site
Yeah.
and have it be included in the project costs. But there are operational kinds of costs or sort of secondary costs that the town has to consider. Sometimes on the street, if you have to improve
Right, if you have a
sidewalks,
40-month phase project, there's going to be operational costs that you're going to have to
Right.
consider on that the appropriation will not absorb.
No, I'm talking about the actual replacement of the field itself.
Oh, those, I'm talking about the operation of the
2 years
building.
ago, and now you have to put it in, and they're not gonna reimburse
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
I mean, these are things that
The-
aren't,
the
that are
other-
above and beyond the project that.
That's an important point for people to keep in mind, too, that the reimbursable, right. That's
Yes.
exactly, Rick. I was going to say,
Right.
it's important to keep that concept in mind. The total project is going to involve a lot of different, items, building construction, site, furniture and equipment, and so forth. That's all within the so-called total project cost. What's eligible for reimbursement, though, from the MSBA is a much more finite scope of work
And less.
and less than the total project cost. So please don't immediately jump to the conclusion of whatever the total project cost is and whatever Stoughton's reimbursement rate is. You can't just do the math.
That's correct.
You have to look at what's eligible for reimbursement, then do the math.
Don, we're going to get an updated project plan to show, where we are to date, and then what if there's a readjusted, if there are adjustments, future adjustments in the schedule, or are we just going to go with that as a template for now? And
You're talking about the project schedule
Yeah.
itself? We're always tweaking it, but right now we're on course, even though it's aggressive, it's still on course.
This is on the schedule we handed out, I don't know, 2 or 3 meetings ago,
Yeah.
but we're on schedule.
We're on
to-
schedule at that point.
I think that's important for people to know,
Yep.
so that, because they're going to be continually wanting to know, well, so where are we with this plan? Because
Yeah.
we are
And
pretty aggressive, and we've covered a
as I
lot of
said,
ground, which is
it-
terrific.
As Roberta said, you're right, it's going to be a quick turnaround because we want to have the submission for, the next MSBA submission would be December 1st, that first week in December. But
We may end up with 2 meetings in October, maybe 2
Yeah.
meetings in November.
And these are highlighted in the plan, the timeline as milestones, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Will we get the response back from the MSBA at our next meeting?
Yeah, I think they're
Yes.
limited to 3 weeks, Roberta. so-
Yeah.
Okay, well, I didn't know, I mean.
Well, let me just say, this is based on our schedule, and maybe not the MSBA schedule. Based on our schedule, we should have the MSBA's response by the 2nd of October. And then we have till probably our next meeting to turn around the responses.
That would be ideal
Actually,
That's-
if we have our responses as a draft for you at the building committee.
Right.
Right, right.
So-
Well, we'll probably have, even if it's not formal, we'll have an informal conversation with them before the next meeting to see what they say.
In case there's something big jumps out or
Yeah.
something like that, which I'm not really expecting, so,
No.
based on what I've seen anyway, so.
But there is a lot of work. But there's a lot of work that's already been done by Carl's people already ahead of that. There's been some work done on our side. Conversations with Joel and, Julie continuing. Although I know Julie's, her homework assignment's done for a little while. But, no, I didn't say you were done, John. I said for now. So there's things that are coming up, so.
Can I suggest something to the committee, since, excuse me, I shouldn't be talking and chewing. So I think for most of the committee members, this is the first real look at all the 8 schematics?
Yeah.
8 schematics. So I would suggest that maybe, since, as Roberta pointed out, we have another meeting in a month, and then, so if you have comments when you go through these, maybe email them to Dom, who can filter them down appropriately, so that we can have an ongoing, don't send them to the group, because we'll run risk of open meeting law violations, but
That's right.
if you have comments, you send them directly to Dom, maybe copy Carl or Scott, and we can compile those from the committee so that everybody has a participatory voice before we reach a preferred schematic.
How is this going to be made available to us?
I think, Carl, you're going to send me a PDF file, and what I'll do is send it to the committee as an attachment, and then we can go from there.
We're gonna do the same with evaluation criteria to you.
Well, that's the next
Yes.
level, right?
Then we can
That's
ask
something
Jamie
also
to
we
turn
can
them out.
discuss at the working
No,
group
no, no,
meetings.
he's just talking about the PowerPoint, yeah.
And on that
Guess
note,
we have
I know,
questions about those.
I seem to have too many questions on things, but, so when we went through site selection, we had different criteria, like a dozen criteria we went through, and we ticked off one after the other, and we could actually, sorry. For site selection, we went through and we ticked off item by item, and we graded them based on, so do we have something like that for,
We do, both.
Okay.
We're gonna finalize it a little bit after Saturday's meeting,
Yeah,
but
both-
we'll, I'm thinking that we probably should set a meeting pretty soon hereafter to talk about this, because we'll have Saturday and we can do that, you know.
You're talking about how did these options fit in with the educational plan and the
Among other
cost
things,
structure?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
yes, and
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a number of criteria.
Analyze
right?
to it,
Presentation of
but
the
we'll
land.
be able to present a list of criteria, and then it is good, that's a meeting where we need to discuss how, how you guys prioritize them.
But both Compass and DRA had criteria, and we actually met in a smaller group with Dr. Rizzi and Principal Miller and Joel Harding to talk about the different options of ad reno and how that influences us on the project. So some of that criteria is already being developed or has been developed.
when you publish this though, Dom, can you also publish the final copy of the educational plan as well?
Yes, you all got it, but
Yeah.
we were, the
Wasn't
question
done.
came out to Joe, from Scott, to you, Julie, right? He wanted to make sure that what we're putting into the PDP was the final.
We sent him the final.
That.
Right.
So if we can get that,
But he has-
if you can send that to me too, I'll make sure that the entire committee gets the final PDP, final educational plan.
Yeah, it might make sense that we have central access to a site somewhere where we can just go grab these from, as opposed to this
It will
email
be in the
distribution.
PDP,
so-
that might
yeah.
be, just give them access to the
One
PDP.
chapter of this.
And I do think a Dropbox is really good. We've used it in other projects with DRA, and you can click on easily and see.
We've got a pretty high caliber IT division within this organization. We should be.
Jamie could set that up,
No,
right?
well,
Unless you guys.
Like I said, it could be a Dropbox or an FTP site.
Right, exactly.
One or the other that you
Easy-
can just
easy to
access
construct,
and just
yeah.
have permission to get in and out of.
Whatever you guys prefer.
So we'll do that. We'll put it in a Dropbox.
I think actually DRA has an FTP site, it's not a Dropbox.
The FTP sites are hard, though. They don't like to leave their stuff up
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah.
Because
a
everybody
little-
has access to a lot of stuff on there.
Joel wants to look at all our other projects.
What? Hey!
But you still have to have permission for that particular file, though.
Well,
No, once you
No.
get into it.
once you get into it, you can look at anything, as I found out.
Right.
Box we're gonna be using for years, probably.
That's true, too.
Should
yeah.
just have a Dropbox.
Right.
Good point, Joel.
We should.
That's true.
Okay, we will have that.
Who sets up a
Any
Dropbox
questions?
for the committee? Should we do that?
I think
we-
you said Jamie could set it up?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, she does. She has a Google Drive that she sets up for the Board of Selectmen for large documents, and it's just an invitation by email. Everybody here can have access to that same.
If there's a problem.
So it's the town's responsibility is the answer to the question, whether Jamie does it or an
Okay.
IT group or somebody.
Just
but,
say, if it is an issue that, Kim in our office can probably set up a Dropbox through us, so.
Dropbox is a private account.
Yeah, you have to set up one.
Yeah.
But it needs to survive the project and still be a part of it.
I agree. This is something that people will be looking at 3 or 4 years after the project is done, and these guys are all retired or
On to
something.
the next 3 projects.
On to the next high school.
Right, anything else?
We're done with schedule updates, so approval of invoices.
Approval of invoices, I sent yesterday the invoice package for your viewing pleasure. The vendor invoice package dated August 31st, 2015 was for the amount of $40,548. The breakdown was Compass was $8,049, and DRA's basic services were $32,500. So the total, again, is $40,548.
there a motion to recommend payment of
I'll make a
$40,000?
motion to pay DRA and
Compass.
Compass, any outstanding invoices.
Invoices
40,500.
CAPM
49.
49-07 and 03? Okay.
I'm sorry, it was
It's
second that.
$40,549 is the
4,000.
correct amount.
Okay,
Was the motion seconded?
yeah,
seconded.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
who's second? I'm sorry.
Rick
Rick
seconded.
Rick, thank you. Oh, you guys are following the form I had from last month, too. Thank you. So, and that was unanimous?
Yep.
Yeah.
Minutes from August 13, 2015. Everybody reviewed, and if so, is there a motion to approve those minutes?
I do have one question, if you have the minutes in front of you, Don.
Yeah.
I almost forgot to give you a call on the first paragraph that starts with Scott Wooden. You said about example art classroom changed to digital lab, reconciling. Another example, business classroom counted against business classroom. I wasn't exactly sure what that meant.
Oh, I meant to say counted against the,
Total classrooms?
no, it was
Technology?
technology.
Technology classrooms?
That's the category it's in on this
You want it-
summary.
I will-
That's the only
I-
thing that I couldn't.
I will make a change on that.
Everything else looked fine to me.
A motion to approve with that
I'll
change?
move to approve it as amended.
Second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
That's one of the
Opposed?
reasons this book is so thick, too. They actually MSBA asked for a copy of all your minutes
That's right.
Yeah, this is,
and all the attachments with those, so.
so we have all of that.
I'll abstain because I was not at the meeting.
Okay, so 9.
With one abstention. And I assume Katie.
Katie has to
would
abstain too, I think.
Would abstain also.
Yeah.
Okay. Future agenda items, Tim?
As we said, the evaluation criteria would probably be the
Yeah.
top of the list of
Can we-
next items.
Is that something that we in the working group can work out and then send out so that?
No, that's what we were
advance.
thinking about.
Oh,
yeah.
Exactly what
Yeah.
Tim was saying, in advance, we'd like to get
I'm
that to
sorry.
you. Yeah.
Because I
Um,
think, and we have templates from previous projects that we can utilize too.
Yeah.
So.
And if October, I'm sorry, Matt, Dr. Rizzi.
If you, so if we're looking at scheduling meetings and other meetings and so on, I just wanted to bring up an issue we have looked at in the past, but I'd like to look at it again. We've had these meetings at both 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock. I'm now coming into a time in the year when I will have multiple other meetings on Thursday nights, some of which I am obliged to be at, which will begin at 7 and 7:30. And it is also much easier for our staff if we meet at an earlier time. So I'm interested in, with a little bit of change in the makeup of the group, if there's any potential openness to moving the meetings back to 5 o'clock, because especially, like, for instance, if I look at some of my collaborative meetings that the law requires that I attend, if it's earlier, I'll actually be able to do 2 meetings in an evening. And at 5 o'clock, I will be missing some of these meetings, and I think it's really quite important that I avoid that conflict whenever it's possible. So I just thought I'd raise that if there's any.
Can you go back to a 5 o'clock meeting?
Yeah, I can't, the earliest I could start is 5:30, literally. I have to send my paper over.
How about you, Rick?
I have to wait till 5 o'clock, if somebody comes in the door,
I can work it out.
earliest I could,
Okay.
and I'm coming from Randolph. I mean,
Okay.
I fly to get here, 6 o'clock is easy, 5:30 I don't have an issue with, but 5 I miss half the meeting.
Well, even at 5:30, that's better than, I mean, so what you're talking about is if there's 6 o'clock, I will miss at least half,
No, I
if
don't
not
miss
all
six.
of many
5:30
meetings, but.
was always fine for me, because if I miss a few minutes of it, that's no big deal. I just don't want to miss a half an hour of it.
Well,
So-
at that point, I still will be missing half hours, but that's better than whole hours or entire meeting.
If we modify our agenda
Flip some of the things I need to do
around some of the
earlier.
things that you have to do, and we talked about
Yeah.
that earlier, then,
Approving the minutes first, and
or,
Or
well,
educational
Not-
issues. that have to
educational
come up.
issues, or things of that nature.
As long as we have a quorum when it comes to things like change orders, which, you know, maybe you have to
Right.
leave, you have to leave.
But
That-
your minutes should always reflect that she
Yeah,
had to leave for
right.
the meeting.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Right,
fine.
exactly, that's how
I'm
it
just trying
shows
to
up.
minimize that happening.
So
5:30 is fine with me, as long as there's no Patriots game going on, so Carl will get here on time.
Right, which is there one now?
There's no objection. 5:30 on what?
October 8th is our next meeting.
And when's
Yep.
what's our submission schedule again? And if we're going to be running tight on that, is there
I
a,
think we're gonna have 2 meetings in October. I think you might wanna meet on the 1st, if that's doable.
my question?
Well, that's not, that's a really not, that's something that we'll do, that response is not something we're gonna need input from people on.
Okay.
I mean,
You're talking about this committee
response
meeting
to the-
October 1st? Tim, you're talking about
we're
this?
talking about
committee?
this committee meeting on October 1st, because then we could pick a date in mid-October to meet again. Back to-
I have a meeting that night.
Oh, the 1st?
I do as well.
You want to do it on the 8th and the 22nd?
That's what I was thinking.
We could do it on the 8th, yep.
But I thought we already had a meeting on the 8th.
Right.
We do, we have a,
And
but
then
then
That's
on
why
the
I
Already
just
twenty-second.
scheduled
that
for
in.
the 8th,
And
and
the
then we have the second
22nd.
one on the 22nd?
2 weeks later as well.
I could do that.
Okay, I will send out an electronic invitation and email on, and change the times. 5:30.
5:30.
But we'll talk about that tomorrow. Yeah, we will.
Yeah, we may meet more than every 2
I
weeks.
was going to say, we
Yeah,
could,
so
we could start getting into weeklies on that.
Might be a little bit tougher. Are you still good for 9 o'clock on Friday?
Yeah, we can talk about that tomorrow. I've also noticed that it can be difficult for Mr. Recupero and Mr. Hartman to get there, and so I was going to propose that we actually move those meetings back a little bit later, and then, but that is not as important as the evening meeting for me.
I do hate walking in the middle of those, but you all seem to be
Well,
fully engrossed when I get there.
It's
So
okay,
if
we
it's-
talk about you early on.
if we do the meetings a little later, I mean, it's like we have other things to do, but Joel and Julie and I have other things to do that we could do before the meeting and then have the meeting start a little later, but that's, you know, that's really about,
We can talk about that tomorrow.
Okay, great.
well, then we have drop off and I mean pick up. We can be very
That
tight,
meeting's his
though.
excuse to leave early, so.
But Joel, we really have to be really tight about the schedule of those things too, because frankly, none of us can give up our entire Friday morning
no, we
as
have
it's
to-
starting
we're
to
gonna
stretch
get more-
into,
we're gonna
even
have
at
to
9
become
o'clock.
more
So that's
disciplined.
not going to work as a long-term strategy.
Anything else that people could see for future agenda, Joel?
Yeah, I sent out an email on this already, but the senior center is looking for a presentation, Carl, from either you or Scott. And they agree that they will do it on Friday morning when we're having one of our working meetings, right after, like at 11 o'clock or something like that. So we need to come up with a date for that. Talking to Karen, apparently there's a good deal of, there's some interest from the people down there. They really would be interested in hearing
Great
from
idea,
everybody
Joel.
about what's going on, and we can get some inclusion from the members of the
We-
senior community.
Confirm a date tomorrow?
I think we can confirm a date tomorrow, and Maggie, it's up to you whether or not you want to join us. I know you wrote back and said that some dates were free for you, so maybe we'll
Some of the
work on
ones
that.
that you mentioned, 2 of the ones you mentioned were okay.
Yes.
It helps to nail them in because after that happens, other things.
No,
come
I
up, so-
understand, I understand.
Did you post about Saturday's workshop too there, Joe?
Yeah, I dropped off some of the flyers at one of these, and I posted it. I had Karen or staff post it actually at the senior center.
Thank you.
Emailed just about all the town meeting members too. We have nearly all email addresses, so.
Social media.
Great.
It's also at the town hall and at the library.
Well, as I might have mentioned on the social media in my email, I was told by Karen that not that many seniors really use social media, so.
We know.
Oh, I'm with it, so I'm good.
But last thing, Carl, one of the things that Scott talked about at the last community forum was, and Maggie, you might remember this, he was talking about going into an elementary classroom
Yes.
and talking to them about their high school. So
Yes.
if you get a chance maybe talk to Scott about that, because I didn't remember it until you just mentioned the,
Okay.
I mean, I was thinking about the other end of the spectrum. like
Yeah, we'd
young
love to
kids.
involve
Yes.
students. In fact, I don't know if you invited any students to Saturday, that'd be great too.
Yeah.
But- Yeah.
Commission may be coming. And of course, we sent out a one call out email to all the parents.
Super.
Yeah, middle school might be the most appropriate. Those are kids who probably would be coming into a new high school. Yeah.
There's nothing further. There's a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
All those in favor of adjourning, aye?
Aye.
Hi,
Thank you all.
see you in the morning.